So that was the third kind of flight. It was the more exciting part of it. But a lot of the time at 3,000 feet, you can't see the details. So the most used maneuver was just do a split S, turn the plane upside down and let it fall inverted in a half a loop, and then come out going the other direction over your target that you were trying to look at. That gave you more speed and a little bit of surprise, because you were flying that direction with the engine running, and then you cut the throttle and end up back on target behind you going the other way.
Okay.
So we got a lot of ground fire. I had, in 14 months that I was there, my airplane was the only one that didn't get shot down. Everybody else had lost at least one airplane, and some of them more. Even
at that high of altitude?
3,000 feet, the bullets, you can see the traces. They're arcing past you, but you know, they're pretty well spent. You know. But at 1,000 feet or 300 feet, yeah, they come right on through and out the other side.
Okay. Were there any, or can you describe were the evacuation procedures? I mean, when a plane would get shot down, I mean,
in all the planes we lost, we only had one. Well, we did in other platoons. We had people killed outright. We had almost everybody we had was not unharmed, but able to be back flying in a few days. One of the cases where they were out in the jungle and got shot in the engine, so the engine caught fire. They put it in the top of a tree out in the jungle, got their seatbelts unhooked, and then the airplane fell out of the tree. So they got pretty mangled. We had to go in with a helicopter and drop a penetrator down through the trees and get them out of there. They were shipped off to Hawaii, I guess it was, for major medical help. But all the rest of the guys did just fine. You know, these little airplanes, you hit the ground at 45 miles an hour, and most of the time you can crawl out of that and dust off and keep on going.
Okay. So they didn't exactly, it wasn't usually like a parachute out type thing?
Never had any parachute out. We had one guy, we had, one of the airplanes caught fire one day, got shot someplace in the engine, and they made it back on the ground, but there was blazes coming out. It was pretty scary for them. And a week or so later, he got shot again and caught fire, and he got a bullet in the engine, and it was blazing. And he got it close to the ground. I don't remember which pilot it was, but anyway, he got close to the ground, and we could jettison the door off of our airplanes, just pull a handle on the door and fall off. And he got close to the ground, actually touched the wheels, apparently, onto the rice paddy and jumped out, but he left the observer in the back seat. You know, was still strapped in. There was a Marine observer in it. And because he had all that speed build up where he was trying to force it to the ground, and then the lack of his weight up in the front of the airplane, the nose just rose and the plane went right back up, you know, with a passenger in the back seat and no pilot. But fortunately, you know, it ran out of speed and steam and came back down, and the other guy got out as well. But when we went out to pick up the plane, it was just the wingtips and the tail. All the rest of it was burned out, just melted down. We brought the engine back, but it was pretty toasty as well. But yeah, there was a big fight after that. Those two guys didn't exactly see eye to eye.
Did these engines just run on regular gasoline?
They did. They'd run better on regular gas, but the military at that time had a very high octane gas. So they went down to just one grade, and it was a grade that was designed for military piston-powered fighter aircraft, and ours were not that. So we were fouling out spark plugs. They were very high in lead. We fouled out spark plugs all the time. It was hard to keep the engines running right because of all the lead that was in it. It was too hot a gasoline for our engines.
Okay. I guess it would probably vary, but I mean, how many cylinders did these engines usually have?
We had a 6-cylinder, horizontally opposed. They were the Continental. No, they weren't either. They were just 0470s. They had a pressure carburetor on them. O meaning opposed, 470 cubic inches. They were 235 horsepower in that engine, which was a lot for such a small airplane.
Okay. You enlisted, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Can you describe why you enlisted?
Well, I graduated from Western High School, and I was not. I didn't enjoy high school. I mean, I had fun again, running around and getting into trouble, but I wasn't. I knew I wasn't ready for college.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I worked at Jackson's Mill State 4-H camp for 2 summers in their kitchen, and I worked. After I graduated, I got a job at Kroger's, working stocking shelves and stuff, and I couldn't see a future for me in that kind of a thing, and I wasn't ready for college. So the military was a chance to get into aviation in the small airplanes, which is what I wanted. I thought about the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force, but Army aviation offered small airplanes and a complete opportunity to work on the whole airplane, not just the hydraulics or some specialized part like the Air Force does. So I joined the Army, figuring I would sort life out as I went along.
And you were allowed to choose? I mean,
if you enlisted, at that time they were drafting people. You know, if you got drafted, they did with you what they wanted for 2 years. If you enlisted, you had to go for 3 years in the Army. But you had a choice of either, depending on the grade you made on their test. But their test was pretty basic. Their entrance test in the Army, very basic. So if you made a good grade on that, you could choose the field you wanted to go into, or you could choose where you wanted to go in the world. And so I chose Army aviation mechanics with the thought that if I did stay in, I'd go ahead and go through officer training and get my pilot training. But I decided to do it through the civilian world after being there a little while.
Okay. Was there any specific instances while you were in Vietnam of I know you'd mentioned different things, but any specifics of combat that you would like to mention?
I primarily wasn't a combat person, you know. We did get, you know, I would have probably done better if I'd had more of it, but going out and picking up the airplanes, I got some pictures over there, but not of the actual situation. There was one of the times when we got the airplane up and away. In fact, it was the last time I did one, because I had like 2 weeks left in country, and I was training the next people to pick up airplanes. And the perimeter that the Marines had set up around us was being overrun on the one side by the Viet Cong, and they were pushing back. And it was elephant grass, big, tall, brushy and stuff. You could hardly see through this stuff. But our plane was right up against it. So by the time we got the airplane out of there, the helicopter gone, the Marines are falling back past our position. And our pilot that was circling over called in a napalm drop from airstrike. And normally, if you got troops on the ground, you set it up, you know, across the way, so you're not coming right at us. This guy set this drop up coming right at us. And when I looked up, there was an F-4 Phantom dumping napalm bombs off into the swing tanks, and it was tumbling. They tumbled in, over in, coming. It looked like it was going to hit us, you know. And I just stopped to wait and see what was going to happen, because you can't run far enough to get out of it. That's what we did all of the time I was there, was drop that stuff. And I knew, you know, it splashes big and far. But fortunately, it hit the trees far enough out that all we got was a heat wave from it. And yeah, that was one of those times when I thought, well, that's the end of that, you know. But and then, because all that was going on there, the helicopter that came in to pick us up set down in a rice paddy a quarter of a mile away. And there's me and an old sergeant that probably was pushing 40, but he seemed old to a 19 or 20-year-old. We had the equipment that we had with us, including a couple of rockets. These are 2 3/4 inch rockets that are 4 feet long, that we didn't want to just leave laying there. We're running back across the rice paddy trying to stay ahead of the battle in order to get back to our helicopter. And when we got there, they were already off the ground. They hovered just above the water, but they were ready to leave. And he was so tired, the ramp was down out the back of the helicopter, and it's all sloping when they're off the ground. Managed to shove him up in there, and then the helicopter was taken off, and I barely got one hand up there, and they grabbed me and, you know, pulled me up over the side. But those kind of things, you know, they were the excitement of it, I guess. We shot from the airplane at anything that we were authorized to shoot at, including elephants and water buffaloes, if they were suspected of being in an area where they'd use them for pack animals. So I have been elephant hunting and water buffalo hunting, and I've shot. I didn't actually kill any elephants. I did water buffalo, but and people. Of course, we shoot out the windows at people, and they shoot back. And we threw hand grenades out the window, which had to be 150 feet off the ground or so, or they would walk before they got there.
Okay. After any sort of stressful engagement that you experienced throughout, I mean, how did you and your fellow soldiers reduce any sort of stress from that?
I mean, we did what soldiers do. We ran around in the evening. We had an operation that was incredibly laid back compared to anything I see in the military these days. When I was in Germany, I volunteered for Vietnam because I thought the GI Bill was only going to cover, they were talking about reinstating it, and they were talking about at that time only making it apply to people that were actually in combat zones. And since I wanted to get some more training when I got out of the military, I volunteered, and I was interested to see what the rest of the world looked like. I volunteered to go to Vietnam in order to make sure if they passed it that way, I'd be included in it. So, you know, it gave me a chance to get around and see pretty much anything that was going on that way. To relieve stress, you know, the guys went out chasing around, and there was a lot of drinking going on. It took me about a month to figure out that wasn't a good idea. You know? And I spent the last, I don't know how many months it was, but most of my time there driving drunks around. We were assigned a 3/4 ton truck, you know, for the 9 enlisted people, the sergeant and the 8 of us. And the pilots had 2 Jeeps. And you know, when they go downtown drinking, I mean, I might have a beer, but I wasn't going to get to where, because people got killed downtown a lot, you know, so I carried a gun and ended up being the chauffeur. And enjoyed it better that way. The next morning when they were all complaining about miserable headaches, I was in a lot better shape. Because we were outside in the sun and the rain and all that stuff. But we decided we needed another Jeep, you know, so we started looking around for one we could snitch from some other part of the military. And just happened that there was a Navy commander came by, which is like a 1-star general came by, walking one day right past us at the airport, and he said, "My Jeep, I just ran it out of gas out there, and I want you guys to watch it for me while I'm going for help." So he walked on down to some place, and as soon as he said that, we all lit up, you know. It was a brand new Jeep. He had just picked it up off of a landing barge, drove it from the beach that far, and they didn't have gas in it, so it ran out. So we ran down and hooked a rope to it and figured if we get caught before we get it hid, we'll say we were just towing it in for him. And we got away with it. So, and we took it in the back, and since it was painted navy gray, we had to change the color of it and all that. And then the CIA, I believe it was, anyway, I'm sure it was CIA, came around investigating for that thing and talking with various ones if they'd seen anything about it, putting a lot of pressure on. And one of the Marines next door to us, their hut was just beside ours, come over and said, if they ask me, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm not going to jeopardize my career. So that put the fear of God into us. So we got a hold of special forces that we flew for. We were in a position where we got in touch with a lot of people. We got them to bring in a Twin Otter, big twin engine plane with a tailgate. They brought us in an old beat up Jeep with a piece of paper that said they were loaning it to us. And we rolled this brand new Jeep up in the back of that thing, and they went away with it. So, well, that was such a slick operation. We started doing that as a business, you know. And we could have gotten in a lot of trouble, but that's the way it was.
You said you guys would go to town or to bars and things?
Da Nang. Yeah. The first 10 or 12 months I was there, we lived in Da Nang Hotel, right downtown Da Nang, and I had a view out across the beach. And we drove back and forth to work. The airport was 3 or 4 miles away on the other side of town, maybe 5 miles.